Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive. Today we're tackling an opinion piece by Max Boot.
Max Boot.
Yeah, about how a potential second Trump presidency
Right.
might handle the war in Ukraine. And get this, he thinks that Trump, uh, despite, all that stuff with Putin in the past, might actually have to get tougher than Biden to get to peace. Let's
Interesting.
see why. He
Okay.
makes a really good point.
So Boot's argument basically all comes down to leverage,
Okay.
which is something that, is straight out of Trump's playbook, The Art of the Deal.
Strength through leverage, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like his slogan.
It is.
But here's where it gets kind of tricky.
Okay.
The U.S. actually has more leverage over Ukraine right now
Right.
than Russia because we're giving them all this aid.
Yeah.
So that means we have like a lot of influence on what they decide to do.
Yeah, and that kind of raises the question of, like, could this pressure Ukraine into taking a peace deal?
Yeah,
That's maybe not in their best interest.
totally, yeah.
Like, they might have to give up land just so the aid keeps coming.
And I think that's something that the Biden administration is very aware of
Mm.
because Boot mentions that they're rushing weapons and supplies to Ukraine,
Makes sense.
almost like they're trying to get it all in there
Right.
before a potential, aid cutoff if Trump wins.
Exactly.
So it shows how urgent things are right now.
Absolutely. The clock is definitely ticking. So let's say Trump takes office
All right.
and he wants to push Putin to end this war. What can he actually do?
Well, he could always lift the sanctions,
Right.
but Boot says that's probably not going to be enough,
Not really, no.
especially with China in the picture now.
That's right. Yeah.
They've kind of become Russia's new best friend,
Mm-hmm.
economically speaking.
Yeah.
They're buying all that oil and gas,
Yeah, they are.
which, kind of weakens the whole point of those Western sanctions.
Yeah, totally.
So China's a big factor here.
Yeah, China's a big one.
And then there's the whole sanctions thing. He could always threaten tougher sanctions.
Yeah. But it's a little tricky for him.
Well, yeah, because he loves those trade deals.
Exactly.
And China's a big player in that.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't want to mess that up by being all tough on sanctions.
Right.
So what else could he do?
Well, this is where things get kind of interesting.
Okay.
Boot thinks Trump might have to actually be more hawkish than Biden.
More hawkish.
Yeah.
But what about America first
Hmm.
and all that? Like, didn't he want to stay out of these foreign things?
Well, yeah, but remember, it's all about the deal with him.
Mm-hmm.
And to make a deal, sometimes you got to do things a little differently.
Yeah.
Boot says there are two ways he could really turn up the heat.
Okay.
First, give Ukraine more and better weapons.
Okay.
Give them the firepower they need.
So they can actually fight back.
Exactly. And second, he could let them hit targets inside Russia
Whoa.
using U.S. missiles.
With our missiles.
Yeah. And that's something that Biden has been super careful about.
Yeah, he has. So it's kind of like that whole escalate to de-escalate thing he did with North Korea and Iran, right?
It's similar, yeah.
Like, you show him you're not messing around.
Yeah.
And that makes him back down.
Right.
It's a pretty bold move.
It is.
But, I mean, those didn't really work out so well, did they?
Not really.
And there's another big difference here.
What's that?
Well, in those other cases, like with the nukes,
Right.
those regimes saw those programs as, like, essential,
Yeah.
Like, they wouldn't give them up for anything.
Right.
But this war, for Putin, it's different.
It is. Yeah.
He could lose some ground
Right.
and still spin it as a win at home,
Yeah.
right? Like, he doesn't have to win everything
Doesn't have to win everything.
to stay in power.
Exactly.
And Boot even mentions, get this, the British Chief of Defense Staff
Yeah.
estimates that Russia's already lost like 700,000 people.
Wow.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of casualties.
But this war is hitting them harder than maybe Putin thought it would.
It seems that way. And that brings up another interesting point that Boot makes about how Putin might react to all this. He thinks that if Putin sees that Trump's serious about upping the military support for Ukraine,
Okay.
it might actually make him more likely to negotiate.
So you're saying that, like, by making things riskier,
Yeah.
Trump could make peace more appealing to Putin.
It's kind of like a gamble,
Yeah.
but Boot thinks it's one that Trump might be willing to take.
Okay.
Because of that whole art of the deal thing, it's
Right.
all about being unpredictable, pushing the boundaries.
Right.
So
Right.
it could play out in some unexpected ways.
Yeah, so we got this, like, clash of personalities,
Yeah.
ideologies, strategies,
Mhm.
and it's like Ukraine's fate is hanging in the balance.
Right.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. And we can't forget about what this could mean for the rest of the world. I mean,
Right.
if Trump pulls off some kind of peace deal,
Yeah.
even a shaky one,
Yeah.
it would change things big time. It would be like a whole new direction for U.S. foreign policy.
Okay.
You know, more about deals and less about, like, sticking to the old ways.
Right, right. But what about, like, the moral side of things?
Yeah.
I mean, can Trump, with his, history with Putin,
Yeah.
actually get a deal that's fair to Ukraine?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's not just about business here.
I know.
We're talking about people's lives and their country.
You're right. And Boot himself has some doubts about whether Trump could put aside his personal feelings
Okay.
and really do what's best for Ukraine. He even compares it to that whole decent interval thing with Nixon in Vietnam.
Okay, for those of us who weren't around for that,
Right.
what does decent interval actually mean?
Basically, it was Nixon's plan to get a temporary peace.
Okay.
So the U.S. could pull out their troops
Right.
and give the South Vietnamese government a chance to hold on.
Okay.
But it didn't really work.
It didn't.
No. As soon as the U.S. left, the South Vietnamese government collapsed.
Oh, wow.
Saigon fell, and that was that.
So Boots saying that any peace deal Trump makes could just be a temporary fix?
Yeah, like a Band-Aid.
Okay.
It might look stable on the surface, but underneath,
Yeah.
it's setting things up for Russia to win in the end.
Okay, so that raises a big question.
Yeah.
What would a real lasting peace in Ukraine actually look like?
Exactly.
Would Russia have to, completely pull out?
Mm,
Would NATO have to give security guarantees?
maybe.
What about, reparations for the damage?
All those things would have to be on the table.
It's complicated.
It is.
And with Trump,
Right.
there's always that, unpredictability factor.
There is, yeah. He's tough to predict.
And that could be good in this situation,
Could be good.
but it could also mean that he just, abandons Ukraine if it's not good for him anymore.
Exactly.
Boot talks about Trump's flexibility as a possible advantage, right?
It warns that it could easily flip the other way.
And leave Ukraine hanging.
Right.
So it's like we're looking at this very uncertain picture. On one hand, you got Trump, who could shake things up,
Right.
disrupt everything, and force everyone to rethink things. But on the other, he's known for being impulsive
Yeah.
and putting his own interests first.
True.
So where does that leave us?
It's that mix of potential and risk that makes this whole thing so interesting.
It's like a real-life drama.
It is. It makes us think about how countries deal with each other,
Yeah.
the role of power, and whether morality even matters in international relations.
It's heavy stuff.
It is.
And I think you've highlighted something really important here.
What's that?
This isn't just some theoretical debate.
No, it's not.
There are real people whose lives are affected by every decision that's made.
Absolutely. Foreign policy isn't a game.
Right.
These are real lives and futures at stake.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get caught up in these what-if scenarios.
Yeah.
But we got to remember that the choices made by those in power,
Right.
they have consequences for all of us.
So what's the main thing you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
Stay informed. Talk about these issues. Hold your leaders accountable,
Okay.
no matter who they are or what party they belong to.
Doesn't matter.
No. Because the future of peace and security, it doesn't just depend on presidents and diplomats.
Yeah.
It depends on all of us being informed and engaged citizens.
Well said. And on that note, okay, so it feels like we've really gone deep here today, from the leverage and sanctions all the way to could there even be a military escalation and
Right.
the ethics of making a deal with Putin?
Right.
But before we wrap up, I want to go back to that big question we started with.
Okay.
What if Trump gets a second term and he actually gets a peace agreement in Ukraine?
Yeah.
What would that mean in the long run?
Would it be like, a stroke of genius,
Yeah.
proof that Trump's a master deal maker?
Right.
Or would it be seen as like a short-sighted move?
Yeah.
Something that actually makes the world less stable.
Yeah.
Remember Boot uses that phrase, decent interval, which kind of implies that the fighting might stop for a bit,
Right.
but it's not really a true solution.
Okay, so you're saying even if Trump gets everyone to sign on the dotted line, the peace might not actually hold.
Exactly. Like all the underlying conflicts and the power struggles,
Yeah.
they're still there under the surface,
Right.
just waiting to erupt again.
So it's like a temporary fix, not a cure.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's not just about what's in the agreement itself.
Right.
It's about the message it sends to the rest of the world.
That's right.
Like if it looks like aggression wins, does that encourage other countries to use force to get what they want?
It's a real possibility.
What about America's role as a global leader?
Yeah,
Does it make us look like we're backing down from our commitment?
potentially, yeah.
Putting quick wins ahead of our values and,
Yeah.
the idea of a world order based on rules?
These are really big questions.
They are.
And they go way beyond just Ukraine. They get to the core of how countries interact with each other. Like,
Right.
what's the role of power?
Yeah.
Does morality even have a place in international relations?
It's a lot to think about.
It is, yeah.
But I think you've made something really clear.
What's that?
This isn't just some theoretical discussion.
No.
There are real consequences to all this.
Absolutely.
Real people's lives are at stake.
And it's easy to get caught up in hypotheticals.
Right.
But we need to remember those real-world consequences.
Yeah.
Every decision matters.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
Stay informed. Keep talking about these issues.
Yeah.
And hold your leaders accountable.
Mm.
It doesn't matter who they are or what party they belong to.
Right.
The future of peace and security depends on all of us.
Yeah.
We all need to be informed and engaged citizens.
Well said. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up our deep dive into Mac's boots analysis.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the news and ideas that are shaping our world to sort.